Good evening everyone. So today I have again come up with another important video lecture, live session of our this journey where we will be conducting 50 days live sessions to help you in your mains preparation. And in that series today I have come up with another important topic, that is the Election Commission and the transparency debate, a topic which is currently in news, right? And it has been raising a lot of debates around the transparency and the idea of free and fair election. And of course we know that to conduct the free and fair election we have the Election Commission, which is its duty to conduct the free and fair elections in this country. So let us join to discuss this important topic, which is we have basically taken from your GS paper 2. However, in the course of our discussion we will also try to understand and analyze the topic from the while linking the topic with other GS papers, right? So we will be adopting a dimensional approach while trying to understand the topic. So let us begin. As you know that we at CSAP IS Academy have been conducting this 50 days mains live sessions where we will be discussing various important topics. We will be providing the gist of the topics. We will be then interlinking these topics with other topics from other GS papers, and we will also provide some of the previous year question papers, and based on that and linking it with the contemporary debates and the current news, we will try to analyze that how these topics could be understood in the contemporary situation, and therefore how that knowledge and understanding can be used in developing your answers, in preparing your answer, how you can incorporate the recent debate in your answers to make your answers better ones. So please join us and be benefited by this initiative that we have taken for our students. We have also been conducting the differentiator batch. We have just started with this batch. This is specifically designed to help the students in their essay paper, where we will be conducting 7 days classes, and after that we will be having a detailed workshop on guiding you as how to prepare yourself for the essay paper, how to write essay, right? So along with that there are other details that without going into the detail of all of that, I would request that during the course of this live session a Google form will be shared with you. You can fill up the Google form and reach out to us and with whatever queries and concerns that you have, and we at CSAP IS Academy would be happy to take all of your concerns and help you in the most meaningful and productive way. And to tell you that I have also been conducting this ethics class. So if you are preparing for your mains and if you have problem with the ethics paper, because this ethics paper again is very crucial for you, because this is not there just in your mains, but your ethics, from the ethics paper you will also be asked many questions during your interview. So if you have studied this ethics paper thoroughly, and if you have understood the concepts and the ethical dilemmas, this will really help you in your subsequent stages also, not just in your mains but also for your interview. Also this knowledge, this understanding of ethics will help you, right? So if you are interested you can join the ethics course, but for all of that you can just drop us message after this with this video. You can drop your messages, or you can follow the Google link that will be shared along with this, and you can reach out to us and we will be more than happy to help you, right? So so let us straight away now come to the topic, the Election Commission and the transparency debate. Now what we have decided at CSAP IS Academy is that we will be providing the gist of the topic, and we will be telling you the interlinkages and also help you understand or scan through this topic by analyzing some of the previous year question papers, and based on that make an assessment as relating it with the contemporary debates and the current news, that how we can basically make some guesses as what could be the probable questions from these themes, right? So we will be doing it in a very brief manner. However, if you are interested to in getting the PDF, you can reach out to us. You can download our app, and you can go to the material sections there, where we will be notes and material sections, where we will be sharing these PDFs also, which may be very, very helpful for your preparation, and it will also help you cover. So but in our other courses, if you join our courses, we will be delivering detailed lecture, and we will also be specifically helping you as how to prepare that content and structure it around your answers. So for all of that, you can reach out to CSAP IS Academy. You can drop your comments, you can give us your feedbacks, you can follow the Google Drive, you can download the CSAP IS Academy's app, and you will get access to us, and we'll also be reaching out to you with whatever suggestions or whatever guidance that you will be requiring. So without moving ahead, let us understand what is the purpose, right? So here today we are trying to understand the Election Commission's constitutional role. We all know that it is a constitutional body. So what is its role, and need for electoral reforms in India, for example? So therefore what you will find is that this topic broadly covers so many aspects, right? So what is the role of the Election Commission? What are the requirements for the electoral reforms? What kind of electoral reforms are required in our country? Whether electoral reforms have taken place in our country earlier or not? And what is the contemporary debate even with regard to the electoral reform, right? Let's say then familiarize with the debate around EVM, voter rolls and transparency concerns. I think you have, if you are reading the newspaper daily and making your notes, so what you can do is that you can, CSAP IS Academy also has the news analysis session, so you can follow that. You can go to YouTube section of CSAP IS Academy, and there you will find everyday newspaper analysis, which will also help you be updated with the contemporary developments and the recent current affairs, right? So if you are following that, you would know that what are the debates that are going on around EVMs, voter rolls and the transparency concerns, right? So, and finally we will link with the constitution. Of course it is a constitutional body, the Election Commission, but along with that also, because it has to do with the conduct of the election. So with regard to conducting that election, the constitution provides one of the basic structure, and about the basic structure we will not be dealing in detail, but however if you are interested in knowing about the basic structure of the constitution, what you can do is that you can just type CSAP IS Academy basic structure, and you will be guided to one of our previous live sessions, where the basic structure debate has been dealt in all detail, right? But here we will be just referring to basic structure to highlight that free and fair election is one of the important basic features of our Indian constitution, and therefore in that regard we will also have to know about this Representation of the People Act and the current debates. Okay, so as we know that the Election Commission is the constitutional body, and as per the Article 324, right, it is responsible for conducting free and fair and impartial elections in our country, and with regard to parliament, state legislatures and the offices of president and vice president. And if we look at the composition, right, you will find that Chief Election Commissioner and the president basically has the power to fix the commission's size, and since 1993 you will generally find that there is Chief Election Commissioner and there are 2 election commissioner, right? So that is the composition basically, right? Now with regard to that, then the formalities that we can talk about, right, is up to 65 years, the tenure of 6 years, and security of tenure is also provided. So all these aspects are very much there. So this is the broad content that you will have in our PPT, and however in the course of our discussion we will try to be moving a little faster, so that we can focus more on the PYQs, the probable question and the current debates, right? However it would be equally important for the students who are preparing for the mains to know the content, the static part of the topic, you know, is very, very important. However, along with the static part, we will also have to bring about the current affairs and use that in our, you know, answers, so as to make our answers more dynamic and more relevant, right? So to briefly capture the static part, you know, so basically the conducting the elections and you know, whenever there are election related disputes, you know, it would be the responsibility, you know, the election commission has certain constitutional and statutory powers, right? And it has the power to prepare the electoral rolls, and you know the controversy around the electoral roll that is going on, right? So so you have okay, and then let's say Representation of the People Act also talks about the conduct of elections, qualification, disqualification and the corrupt practices, right? If the corrupt practices, you know, enter into the electoral process, right, obviously then the election, you know, electoral process needs to be reformed, right? And the election commission also has quasi judicial powers. Interestingly, it can cancel the polls in case of rigging as per, you know, section 58A of the RPA, that is Representation of the People Act, right? And disqualifying candidates, and you know, it also has the power to disqualify candidates on certain grounds, right? And now if you look at the core functions, it's basically preparation and revision of electoral rolls, you know, for all election. But however, with regard to the electoral rolls, there may arise controversy from time to time, and it is in this context that we will be focusing upon some of the recent developments, right? And enforcing model code of conduct, again, right, you generally you must be aware about the model code of conduct and how, you know, before the elections there is model code of conduct, the level playing field, you know, all those things are very much important, and the election commission has the responsibility, you know, these actually fall under the functions of the election commission, right? Finally, you will also have EVM and VVPAT oversight, right? This is one of the another core important function of the election commission, and in this regard also you must be aware about the development, you know, the recent controversies surrounding the EVM, the, you know, VVPAT and interestingly electoral rolls also. So we will come to that interesting part. So, you know, therefore enhancing the transparency in the elections, you know, increasing transparency in the elections to uphold the conduct of free and fair election becomes one of the major, you know, functions of the election commission, right? Now electoral reforms. Now why do we need electoral reforms? Of course, whenever there are problems, these problems needs to be, you know, solved, right? So with regard to electoral processes, you know, during the election process, if there are problems, we need to solve those problems, and for that what the term we have is electoral reforms, right? So in order to enhance transparency and accountability, for example, the electoral process has to be very transparent and there has to be accountability, right? The transparency is again very, very important because free and fair election is one of the basic structures of our constitution, right? And inclusive participation and ethical practices, right? So it has to be, you know, there has to be inclusive participation. The participation of all the segments of the society in the electoral process is very, very important, and for that we need to also prevent criminalization, corruption, coercion, right? All these aspects which can actually potentially damage, cause harm to the electoral processes. We need to address these concerns, we need to address these problems, and the election commission basically plays a very important role in this regard. So whether we have made some electoral reforms over the period of time or not, and whether there are also at present also there are some issues which are coming up and where the, you know, we need to pay attention with regard to those issues. So we can talk about in for that also, that if we look at pre-2000, then we had certain, you know, reforms, you know, electoral reforms. We can talk about lowering of the voting age, anti-defection law, introduction of the anti-defection law, and post-2000 also you will have VVPATs, you know, capping expenditure, you know. So when you put a cap on how much money the candidates can spend in their elections. Nota, for example, none of the above, right? So for example, if you do not wish to vote any of the candidate, then you can exercise nota. So therefore, at present, currently the debates around the state funding of elections, for example, when we talk about state funding of elections, again this becomes very, very important, because you will be able to understand it, because with regard to electoral bond, for example, there was this electoral bond scheme which was introduced, of course, and we have already said that CSAP IS Academy has written a very good blog on that. So what you can do is that you can go and type CSAP IS Academy electoral bonds, and you will get to know about the electoral bonds and how and why it is so problematic with regard to funding of the elections, right? So therefore, there is this debate, there is this concern that the state funding of the elections, the process of state funding for the elections should be initiated, and simultaneous elections, for example, right now you have this debate going on, one nation, one election. How do we understand that? So for that also we have discussed in our previous videos when we talked about basic structure and constitutional amendment, because conducting simultaneous elections would require certain constitutional amendments to be made, and whether those constitutional amendments can be so easily initiated or processed, because some of the amendments also require ratification by half of the states, more than half of the states, right? And therefore stricter disqualification norms, right? So these are the contemporary issues which have been making news, and where the reform is basically being asked for, right? Now we have already talked about the need for reform. Why does the need for reform basically arise? Because there is criminalization of politics, the use of money and muscle power. Now this can again and then non-transparency in political funding. So despite this through these electoral bonds, right? So therefore reforms are very much vital with regard to this electoral process. What you will find is that these reforms are very much vital to preserve the sanctity of democratic processes and to restore the public faith in the institution, so that people continue to have their faith in the public institutions, in the offices like the election commission. It is very much important to therefore conduct those reforms from time to time, and to ensure the smooth and conduct of the elections, where the idea of free and fair election is basically maintained, right? So the common malpractices, if you look at historically, there has been this problem of booth capturing, the communal caste appeals and so on and so forth, the government machinery, for example, the misuse of government machinery, and we all know the famous case where the government machinery was abused, so Indira Gandhi's case is very popular in that context. And therefore paid news and fake social media campaigns, these are again the latest trends, the paid news and social media, fake social media campaigns. But what is important is that all these issues, all these problems basically have a very negative impact on democracy, because this basically distorts the electoral mandate, and sometimes it also reduces the faith in the institutions. If the institutions are not able to make an intervention and reform, initiate certain reforms in a time bound manner, people generally tend to lose their faith in the institution. So it becomes all the more important for bodies like election commission to make timely interventions whenever there are such issues that are coming up in our electoral processes, right? So but there are again some of the limitations also. For example, when you have the model code of conduct, violations are monitored, but many a times they are not legally binding. So so the power is very much limited, or many a times there have also been allegations of the election commission being partisan in its role with regard to those violations. Therefore these are the recent challenges that are there in front of the election commission, and how it addresses all these challenges becomes very important for us, because it then affects our democracy and the democratic functioning, right? So now EVMs, as we know, they were introduced later to replace the paper ballots and improve speed, reduce errors and prevent bogus voting. However, the EVMs which were introduced the EVM that was introduced to solve some of the problems, right, appears to be creating new set of problems. At least when we look at the current allegations and the controversy that is taking place in our country, right. So the credibility of the EVM, the debate whether the EVMs can be tempered, has gained quite a momentum, and elections after elections, this EVM issue has been making news, right. And of course along with that, VVPAT, of course, voter verifiable paper audit trail, so that was introduced again much later to again solve some of the problems of EVM, right. And so the voters basically get this, but now again with the VVPAT also, what is the problem is that all the VVPATs are not counted. So therefore randomly you take 5 per constituency, and then those VVPATs are matched, and therefore many a times there are allegations that there could be tampering, and therefore there is a lack of transparency. These kind of issues are brought with regard to the use of EVM and VVPAT machines, and many a times there are demands that all the VVPAT should be counted, 100% counting of the VVPAT should be made, right. So these are at the level of the demands which are being raised, and these demands have not just been coming from the political parties, but most importantly the citizens also, right. The civil society and the citizens have also been making such demand, and therefore how and what kind of interventions, what kind of steps does the Election Commission take with regard to such apprehensions become very, very important. After all, the credibility of the constitutional body, that is of Election Commission, is also at stake whenever election after elections there is some doubt or apprehensions that they emerge in each elections, right. So now let us look at some of the interlinkages. Okay, so we have briefly captured the static part, right. Of course that static part again becomes very, very important, and for the time constraint we are not going and discussing it in all detail. However, if you are interested in doing that, you can join us at CSAP IS Academy. We have our mains crash course going on. There also we will provide you the structured format as how to prepare for all these topics, and most importantly, if you want the PPT also, then you can download the CSAP IS Academy's app and we will get access to these documents. I would request that if you have traveled so far and if you have liked the content, please subscribe the channel, like this video, and most importantly drop your comments in the comment section, because it is based on your comments that we improvise and bring about important topics from time to time. So with that note, I hope you will leave your important comments and feedbacks in the video. With that note, let us now move ahead and try to see the interlinkages of this particular topic with other topics from other paper. For example, from GS3 we can see the use of EVM, VVPAT, VVPATs, the mobile voting, ECI net, so all these topics can also be understood by referring to our understanding of, let's say, from the science and technology part, right. So these are all the technology and the understanding of technology, their limitations, their challenges, the threats, becomes very much important. So the understanding, the reading and understanding of the technology, science and technology part can actually help us make better sense of this debate around the Election Commission and the transparency, right. Because if the elections are being conducted in such machines, can there be issues with these machines, can there be malfunctioning, can these machines be tempered? So these kind of questions can be better understood by taking help of our knowledge of technology, right. Similarly, we have internal security, right. Can we link this idea with the internal security, right, security concerns? For example, managing poll related violence. We have seen from time to time that during the polls there are internal security challenges also, right. So there are poll related violences, right. So how do we manage these poll related violences therefore maintain the internal security, right. So for that again this internal security becomes very important. Similarly, the cyber attacks, right, we need to know about the cyber attacks, right. And again, the election, conducting an election is a very expensive, affair. For example, why this one nation, one election is being talked about right now is also from that angle of economy, that lot of money is, goes in conducting elections, and therefore, if there could be this one nation, one election, so lot of, money could be saved. And when we say money, of course, it has to do with economy again. Now, the funding of the elections, for example, right? Earlier we talked about electoral bonds, right? Earlier we had the electoral bonds, right? And how there can be some black money that may be involved in the elections, right? So how do we check, put a counter check on the black money that is used during the elections, right? So all these aspects therefore become very, very important, and these are the topics which are coming from your GS paper 3. So see, though we have taken a topic, of election commission and the transparency debate, so that is directly from your GS paper 2, but however, understanding the nuances of this particular topic from GS2 actually requires a background understanding of your other GS papers. So if you have, studied in detail the technology, science, from the science and technology segment, that knowledge can also be actually used, in preparing some portion of your answer for this topic, which actually comes from GS2, right? Now, similarly with GS paper 4, which is the ethics, and I have already told that, I will be conducting the ethics, classes. So if you are interested in joining the ethics classes, you may contact CSAP IS Academy. You can drop your comment, or you can, just follow the Google link that will be shared with this video, and our team will reach out to you and help you with specific, guidance, right? So with the GS paper 4, you see probity in governance. Again, we know probity again is another important topic in governance, in ethics paper, right? So reducing criminalization and corrupt practices, right? So how do we reduce this criminalization and those corrupt practices? How do you prevent them, these corrupt practices, from entering into our electoral processes, right? Becomes very, very important. So how do we ethically conduct, how do we practice that ethical conduct of the election? How do we reduce these corrupt practices, right, of black money, for example, corruption, right? How do we reduce all of that? How do we address those problems? Then integrity and accountability. For example, whenever these allegations or whenever these apprehensions are brought, right? So the integrity and accountability of the officials involved in the process is also gets tested, right? So for example, their duty is to uphold free and fair election, right? The role of Election Commission, of India is to basically uphold free and fair elections. But if the officials, do not have this integrity and accountability, right? So they may not be delivering, they may fail to, perform their responsibilities, and they may not be able to functioning in an ethical manner, right? So these are again therefore themes, like, and similarly you have the ethical dilemmas. For example, fake news versus free speech, right? Balancing surveillance versus security, privacy. Again, we know privacy is another important, one of the important fundamental rights, Puttaswamy case, right? So but then surveillance again also becomes very important, so how do we balance between these two important, ethical dilemmas, right? So for that, the understanding of the ethics paper again becomes very, very important, right? So therefore, even in this topic, there are some ethical dimensions involved, and to understand those ethical dimensions, we must use the knowledge that we develop by going through the course and understanding the syllabus of the ethics paper, right? And in order to do that, you can join us, and I will be teaching that ethics paper at CSAP IS Academy. Now let us look at the importance of, the dynamic current affairs. What are the important, current debates and current affairs that are going on? Now when we basically use these current examples, they will basically add contemporaneous and depth to static answers. As I already said, the static portion is there, but we need to incorporate the current, developments, the current affairs, and we need to incorporate them in the static portion of our answer, because that will make our answers very much rich in content, right? And that will also make our answer very much relevant. So and then you can also use some of the judgments, for example, with regard to VVPAT, criminal cases, and also the policy debates, for example, right? State funding, nota, and so on and so forth, right? Now let us look at the current controversies, like for example, Maharashtra voter list controversy, right? And what is the background? So here there is discrepancy in voter additions, which have been alleged. It has been alleged that there are approximately 47 lakh new voters were added within a short span of 4 months between the Lok Sabha and Assembly elections. So when the Lok Sabha elections were conducted, the number of voters they were there, it suddenly increased in the next assembly elections when it was conducted after some months, right? And then therefore this has actually raised questions about the voter roll verification process, and the serious doubts have been cast that whether fake people have entered into that electoral rolls, or how do we understand this sudden rise in the voter roll, right? And therefore it has also raised the issue that there is a deficit in procedural transparency. Now the Election Commission of India has somewhat been reluctant to release that data based on that newly added or deleted voters, right? Who are the voters who have been added newly, who are the voters who have been deleted, all that data, if it can be provided in a very systematic structure format, perhaps that would have addressed some of those apprehensions or concerns which have been raised by different political parties and the civil society as well. So therefore there seems to be a deficit in procedural transparency. However, this is very important, because when we are dealing with elections, we know that transparency is of utmost importance, and therefore transparency needs to be upheld at any cost. And therefore this lack of procedural transparency has been criticized by the stakeholders, citing concerns over public accountability and data integrity, right? Now there is also concern over institutional oversight, right? And these civil society groups and academic observers have also highlighted the need for rigorous monitoring of booth level officers, right? Alleging that unchecked additions to the rolls may compromise the accuracy and neutrality of electoral rolls. So how do we know that these electoral rolls, no malpractice has actually entered while preparing the electoral rolls? Because the booth level officers, for example, they play a very important role. But do we have mechanisms to check, and cross check and verify the functioning of the booth level officers? Have we actually provided them the required training and skill set, right? And therefore do we have the second layer of verification in place? Because we cannot leave everything to the booth level officers, because there are dangers of the fake people entering into the electoral rolls, and if so happens, then the entire election process would be compromised, right? So and therefore the democratic implications are also there, because if that happens, as it has been alleged from time to time with regard to Maharashtra elections, or even for example Haryana election, what happens as a result of all of that is that the public trust gets eroded in the process, right? And if the public trust gets eroded in the electoral process, that would be very dangerous for our country. That would be a defeating sign for our democracy, and therefore the constitutionalism also, right? So therefore there is also this allegation that the constitutional duty is not being performed adequately, and for that critics cite the failure under Article 324 to ensure free and fair elections, right? So if these electoral rolls are not prepared in a very verified manner, and if transparency is not maintained, and if in the process the elections are compromised, then it's like the Election Commission has failed in its constitutional duty of upholding free and fair election, right? And critics have also alleged this, and this has been in the current news. Of course, we are not just going into the political angle of it, political aspect of it, that is a different thing, but what are the constitutional aspect to it, that again becomes very important for us if we are preparing for our mains, right? So therefore we need to incorporate this understanding of the current debate, current news, right? Similarly, we have Bihar electoral roll verification. You must have heard about this, sir. Okay, special intensive revision. So what is this special intensive revision, right? So here it has been announced that before the next assembly elections, there will be a special intensive revision of the electoral roll, and therefore the draft roll would be prepared, and the BLOs will go from house to house, right, to verify, and a new and fresh voter list would be prepared. However, in that, whosoever was not there in 2003, they will have to submit their documents, they will have to prove in a way their citizenship to qualify and enter into the voter list, and this has raised serious doubts with regard to various other aspects, right? First of all, let's say with regard to the time, in a very short span of time this is being attempted to be done, whereas in Bihar there are other geographical problems. For example, Bihar, many parts of Bihar generally face flood-like situations during this time, and if this is being carried out in such a haste manner, right, many people may not be able to produce their documents, right, and therefore their name may not enter into the electoral rolls, and in the process they may get disenfranchised, right? And who were the people who will get disenfranchised? They would be mostly the poor and the marginalized sections of the society. Now you see the provision or what is being proposed, how it is going to affect the society again. How it is going to affect the poor and the marginalized sections of the society. Now again, this is from your another GS paper 1. So this way it has interlinkages with all other GS papers, and that is what you need to understand. Now let's say what are the concerns therefore, right? About 2.93 crore voters without 2003 roll inclusion. So those whose name is not included in this 2003 roll, electoral roll, they must provide one of the 11 documents. Yes, and timeline, of course there is a short span, and as I said, there is risk of flood related delays, and in the flood like situations, people will save their lives or they will save their documents, right? So there are these greater risks, and many are also interpreting it that this is in a way NRC like exercise is being carried out in the name of electoral roll, in the name of conducting this special intensive revision of the electoral roll, right? So there are democratic concerns over the process and its design. How several stakeholders therefore have expressed their apprehensions that it resembles the NRC. For example, we have talked about the NRC, and particularly those who are in Assam, they know how people had to go through during this process of NRC and how difficult it was, and it was a very lengthy process, but the way it is being attempted to be done in a very such short span of time again raises concern, and therefore it raises concern that it may lead to exclusion of marginalized and vulnerable population. So basically the poor, marginalized, vulnerable sections of the society may be excluded because of the lack of their ability to produce those documents, and this may again be impacted by, let's say, the flood like situations, the natural calamities on which they have, over which they have absolutely no control. So how your geography, your geographical location actually may have an impact on these issues, again becomes very, very important. Now, so what is the core democratic concern here, right? The voter exclusion, for example, marginalized groups risk due to poor documentation and literacy. They may not be so very aware, they may not be able to keep the documents properly. Transparency deficit, both Maharashtra and Bihar show procedural opacity, right? So there are procedural lapses. These kind of allegations are being made, right? So now the election commission has to really come forward and clarify if there are such allegations are made, then the election, it becomes the responsibility of the election commission to uphold that transparency, and therefore highlight that free and fair election is the basic structure, and it is the responsibility of the election commission to ensure that the conduct of elections are done in a very free and fair manner. And for that, whatever needs to be done, whatever reform needs to be initiated, right, the election commission needs to do that. And manipulation of fear, so targeted exclusion threatened Article 326, that is, so what is the issue when we have studied these two examples? One is that of Maharashtra, another that is of Bihar. What are the two specific issues in both these cases? That Maharashtra, we have a sudden voter surge, right? The voters have suddenly surged. The number of voters that they were there in any constituency during the Lok Sabha election have dramatically increased during in the next assembly election. So therefore adequate reforms are basically demanded, that there should be mechanism in place to verify, to cross check, and the transparency should be upheld to ensure that there was no fake entry into the electoral rolls, compromising and undermining the entire electoral process, right? And with regard to the Bihar, what we have, rushed, document heavy, spatial intensive revision, right, as we have already talked about, and this actually creates a danger of disenfranchisement, right, of genuine voters. Even the genuine voters may be disenfranchised in the process if they do not possess the documents, right? So I hope we have basically provided the static component initially, and from that we provided some of the recent debates and current news, so as to link and understand that reform also. Why is it that the election commission needs to initiate reform from time to time? Because with every changing time, there are new sorts of challenges, right? New set of challenges that enter into the system, and therefore those new set of challenges needs to be addressed in a time bound manner, so as to uphold the idea of free and fair election. And because it is the responsibility, it is the constitutional duty of the election commission to do so, it must come forward and do everything that is needed to uphold transparency and ensure free and fair election in our country. Now, based on all that understanding, let us now look at some of the previous year questions. We have brought the questions from both UPSC and APSC mains, and you can look at the first question. Basically talks about to enhance the quality of democracy in India, the Election Commission of India proposed electoral reforms in 2016. What are the suggested reforms, and how significant are they in making democracy successful? So you see, again there is this thrust on reforms, right? Electoral reforms, as we highlighted that from time to time this electoral reform becomes, the idea of electoral reform becomes very important, because it is through those reforms that the public trust is maintained in the institutions and in the entire process. So if reforms are not done in a time bound manner, the public may actually lose its faith. But more than that, the entire fabric of the constitution, the basic structure of the constitution may also be compromised in the process. Next, you have, in light of the recent controversy regarding the use of EVM, you see, so this is what we say, that whatever is in the debate, whatever is in the news, generally you will see that from those topics they try to link with the recent developments, recent controversies, and from that recent debate, current affairs, and from that they would formulate the topic. So it's not just the static knowledge that is required in your mains, but it is the ability to incorporate the current affairs, right, which is also going to play a very important role. If you have to enrich your answers, if you have to make your answers exceptional, then you must develop this ability, and for that you must also have the knowledge of the contemporary debates, the current news, and for that you can follow CSAP IS Academy's daily news analysis, and you can also reach out to us for joining our courses, so that in those courses we can provide more effective guidance as how to prepare how systematically and in a structured manner that you can prepare your answers on each of these topics, by incorporating the recent, debates and the current news, and thereby enriching your answer quality, right? So if you think that, based on this discussion, if you think that we will be able to provide you, or if you find it interesting, then you can reach out to us. You can simply drop your comments in the comment section. You can tell us how do you like the content, whether you like the content or not, or what are the next topics that you would like us to come up with, so as to help you in your journey or of preparing for the mains, right? So then in 2020 there is a need for simplification of the procedure for disqualification of persons found guilty of corrupt practices under the RPA, right? Again, so therefore Representation of People's Act becomes very, very important, right? What are the provisions? So the static part also becomes very important. What are the provisions? What are the and is there any need to simplify the procedure, right? So all that question, so that you will understand only when you will understand the debates and the challenges, right? And in APSC also again you have what are the provisions of the RPA, discuss the amendments of the act as on date. So how what are the amendments, with as we said that from time to time with regard to our constitution also there have been many constitutional amendments. So similarly with certain acts also you will find that from time to time they need to be amended, isn't it? Why? Because if there are new sort of challenges, right, in order to address those challenges you need to make certain adequate provisions in response to those challenges, and therefore these amendments become very much important, so as to make these acts relevant and to be able and to enable these acts to address the challenges of the time, right? So that's why it becomes very, very important. So from this what we understand is that this topic is very, very important. However, the formulation of the questions that is generally done on this topic is by linking the contemporary debate and current news, and that's why the understanding of the contemporary debate and current news becomes very important, and therefore also an understanding of the interlinkages with other GS papers becomes very, very crucial for you to adopt a multidisciplinary approach in your answers, right? Now finally let us look at what kind of probable questions can be there, because we have discussed what are the recent debates and what are currently in news, what are the things that are currently in news, and based on that can we formulate some questions accordingly. So we have made an attempt to provide 2 sample questions to you. So let us just look at it, and so you see the recent controversies over voter list revisions, now we have not mentioned any state or anything like that, right? But this understanding, whenever we read about the debate and the current news, you will obviously be able to link it with, okay? So along with persistent concerns over EVM VVPAT mismatch have intensified debates around transparency in India's electoral process. Critically analyze the institutional and procedural challenges faced by the Election Commission of India in ensuring free and fair elections. You see, institutional and procedural challenges, right? So what are the contemporary debates and what are the challenges that Election Commission is facing, and for doing what? For ensuring free and fair election. Why? Because it is the constitutional duty of the Election Commission to conduct free and fair election, right? So next, in light of recent electoral controversies, discuss how systematic lapses in electoral roll management and lack of procedural transparency impact the credibility of democratic institutions in India. Evaluate the role of federal coordination and institutional accountability in safeguarding voter rights, right? Because earlier we said there is this danger of some genuine voters being disenfranchised, right? So they may lose their voting rights. Now therefore federal coordination, for example, Election Commission, and you also have, for example, if you are revisiting the electoral roll of Bihar, so how is it that the coordination, how is it that that coordination is being made, and how do you basically look at the BLO level also, right? So what is the role of the election commission and how the BLOs are functioning at the grassroots level, right? So so this understanding this again becomes very, very important, right? And therefore institutional accountability in safeguarding voter, voter rights, so that this is our right, right to vote, right? This is our political right, and therefore this cannot be taken away from us. So all the processes and procedures needs to be placed, mechanisms needs to be placed to ensure that the voters rights do not get compromised, in the process, so therefore these are some of the important questions that we have, such questions can be formulated. So and if you want to respond to these questions, having an understanding, having a knowledge about the current debate, contemporary issues becomes all the more important to formulate your answers, and just the static part is not going to help you. And that is why we say that we at CSAP Academy, CSAP IS Academy are going to train you to do that, much more effectively, and when we will join us, when we will get more meaningful engagement with you, we will be able to guide you and help you in formulating your answers accordingly. So so now let us conclude our discussion so far, and we have discussed it in detail. Now we can say that the election commission is the constitutional guardian. See, if it is the constitutional guardian, it is also its constitutional duty to ensure that the electoral democracy in India is not compromised, right? And electoral democracy needs to be protected, safeguarded, at any cost. It is the constitutional duty of election commission. Its effectiveness lies not in conducting elections only, but in reforming processes, curbing malpractices and enhancing participation. But most importantly, upholding transparency, as free and fair election is one of the basic feature of the constitution, right? It needs to uphold transparency, right? Because free and fair election is one of the basic features of our constitution, right? And for that there is this urgent need for transparent, inclusive and empathetic electoral processes, right? So you need to be empathetic, right? So again, this one is also coming from your ethics knowledge, right? For example, those people who have been displaced due to the flood like situations, right? So they may not possess their documents at all. So what do we do in those circumstances, right? So therefore it becomes all the more important to bring about this transparent, inclusive and empathetic electoral processes, so as to ensure that no one is arbitrarily disenfranchised of his or her voting rights, right? And the Election Commission of India must ensure fair timelines, proper consultation. For example, whenever this federal, earlier we talked about this federal coordination, right? We talked about the federal coordination. So whether there is proper consultation, right, whether there has been proper consultations with the state where these electoral rolls are being revised, right, and how, whether there is effective coordination or not, right? So whether the BLOs have been given adequate training or not, all that needs to be put in place. All the mechanisms need to be taken so as to ensure that no one is arbitrarily disenfranchised in the process, right? And the Election Commission of India therefore must ensure fair timelines, proper consultation and procedural safeguards to protect India's democratic fabric by ensuring free and fair elections in our country. And finally, most important point is that the electoral integrity is the cornerstone of democracy, and if this is compromised, then our democracy will also get compromised, and the spirit of the constitution will also be lost, because free and fair election is again another important feature of our constitution, which is also one of the important basic structures of the Indian constitution. So this way, today we have discussed the election commission and the transparency debate, and the need to uphold transparency in conducting the elections in our country, and to address the apprehensions of the civil society and the citizens, so as to ensure the greater public faith in the institutions like election commission, the greater faith in the constitutional bodies, is very, very important, and therefore that also determines the quality of our democracy, and therefore all efforts should be made, all the reforms should be initiated as per the requirement of, as per the requirement to uphold the idea of free and fair election in our country, because that is the cardinal value that flows from our constitution, because free and fair election is one of the important basic structures of our constitution, right? So with that, we wrap up the discussion on the topic today. However, we have done it in a very concise manner, but if you join us at CSAP IAS Academy, I believe that we will be able to provide more in-depth understanding of these topics and also handhold you to prepare answers around these themes, which are very, very relevant themes, and therefore there is always this likelihood of you getting questions in your mains exam, either it is APSC or UPSC. There is always this probability of you getting the questions from such important relevant topics from your syllabus, which I think based on our guidance you will be able to address much more effectively, thereby increasing your chances of securing ranks in these exams. So with that note, I wish you all the best, and I hope that you will continue to join and support us in our initiative at CSAP IAS Academy. Continue to like and subscribe our channel, and please do drop your comments so that based on your comments and feedbacks we can improvise, we can bring about new topics for the next subsequent live sessions, and provide you adequate understanding of the themes and help you in your preparation journey of APSC and UPSC mains. So with that note, I thank you all for joining, and I will see you in the next subsequent live sessions. Till then, you take care and continue to prepare well for your mains exam. Till then, you all take care, and thank you, and wish you all the very best. Thank you.